Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex and another top 10 list coming at you. This is the top 10 best value characters, and how we're going to define a value character in today's video is a character that is not only useful for a lot of different game modes, but also used by a lot of characters for a lot of different game modes. Because you could sit here and argue, oh, listen, Alex, I use Winter Soldier for tons of content. He's very valuable to me. And that might be true for, random viewer number 68. But for the majority of players, no, Winter Soldier is not really very useful. So I'm going to try and rank the 10 most valuable characters in my mind right now in Marvel Future Fight. So they have to be very used across lots of different game modes: World Boss, ABX, ABL, GBR, Timeline Battle, Alliance Conquest, Otherworld Battle, farming content like Dispatch. They have to be used in a lot of those different game modes, and they have to be used by the community in those game modes. So kicking off the list at number 10, we have AncientOne. And AncientOne, probably a surprise here, and very impressive to be among the top 10 despite not being tier 4. AncientOne gets it done based primarily off of the insane passives and the useful leadership. So useful leadership here increased blast type energy attack by 50%, which is great. Then we get to the major one, which is this passive that gives you so much flexibility. This might be the most flexible passive in the game because it gives you all res, 30% all res, very good for PvP, but also good for PvE against things like Mephisto. Then you have the Ignore Dodge, which is amazing for Null and Gore and other bosses, but it's also really good to counter Spider-Man and other dodge-heavy characters in PvP. And then you have the increased elemental damage, which is just fantastic across the board for any elemental character: Jean Grey, Thor, Storm, etc. So you have this insane passive, and it doesn't stop there, right? Just the support in the passive, you're like, huh, that's pretty good. But then it gets even better because she also has Reflect, which makes her a threat in PvP to punish energy characters like Jean Grey. And the fact that she can counter Jean Grey in some instances while also providing damage to your own Jean Grey and defenses against Jean Grey in the form of resist is just way too valuable. So I see AncientOne used in a lot of content. Like I see AncientOne used as a leadership in obviously a lot of PvE content, and a support in lots of PvE content, which is whether it's ABX, ABL, World Boss, or GBR. You can also use AncientOne in PvP, and that's across the board. Otherworld Battle, yup. Timeline Battle, yup. AC, yup. And if you really wanted to, although she's not very good for it, you could use AncientOne for World Boss Legend. They are not terrible for it. So that's why they are number 10. At number 9, a similar blast type with a bit less of an investment level compared to other characters, Polaris. A very, very good premium support and lead, and it's the support and lead that's going to catch your attention at first. All mutant allies get a big buff there, and then mutant allies get a buff with the leadership, and that's fantastic. But on top of that, Polaris is a very good alternative to some much more expensive mutants for other content. So what I mean by that is particularly ABX and ABL, or ABL I should say, if you don't have mutants and if you haven't invested in Storm, etc., and Jean Grey, then Polaris becomes the third best option. And she's not only the third best option, but she's also self-buffing. She self-buffs herself as a lead and as a support. So her flexibility in that sense is very, very strong. Not quite as, overarching as AncientOne, because she doesn't have pretty much any PvP value aside from, rare instances where you're going to try and buff your mutant allies in a PvP scenario. But what she lacks in the PvP scenario, she makes up for in having the dual ability to either just support your Storm or your Jean in other content or replace them if you need her to replace them. So that is huge, and it is one of the only other characters at tier 3 who is in the top 10. However, we do have another. This is the last. Oh, no, this is the second last. Try to guess who the last one is, but this is the second last at number 8, Shuri. Shuri is very much like Polaris, except she's better because her passives apply to all allies rather than just mutants. She doesn't have a leadership, but she makes up for not having a leadership by having the passive apply to everyone, and then also being a very good tier 3 damage dealer. In much of the same way as Polaris can replace Storm and ABX and ABL, you can have Shuri replace Black Widow or Miss Marvel Kamala Khan or Shadow Shell and still put up very good numbers for PvE content. So Shuri has all of that packaged in with the, on top of the fact that you can take that increased damage dealt to villains and the decreased damage from villains, and you can go ahead and throw Shuri into PvP. Yes, you can, especially if you give her a CTP of Insight. You can absolutely do that in PvP, and she's even seen some play in Alliance Tournament. So very, very flexible character. Among the top 10 for support types, it makes sense. Like for the most valuable, you're going to see support types who can also deal damage, because it just basically, it's an all-in-one character, right? There's nothing that Shuri can't do aside from very niche specific content, or content that restricts her from doing it in general. Coming in at number 7, now we're getting into the tier 4s here. Shadow Shell, don't have her tier 4, but holy crap, even at tier 3 or transcended, whatever, level 80, Shadow Shell is outstanding. Insane DPS combined with basically one of the easiest play styles, with the invisibility, which makes her just even easier to play and even tankier. Just absolutely bananas. And the fact that she can do World Boss Legend, the fact that she can do ABL very, very well, and then she can also do ABX and GBR not quite as well, but still decently, is fantastic. That plus, she can still be your 3rd best character in a Warriors of the Sky PvP team. She's not going to be their Blue Dragon. She doesn't have that much power, but you give her the revive, not so bad. And she pumps out a ton of damage at tier 4, so that's absolutely respectable. Now, of course, you're going to need to put in Sunbird to make that combo work, but she is the 3rd best member of the Warriors of the Sky, and she does have a Warriors of the Sky ally passive buff, which does increase her value even further. So yeah, absolutely deserving to be on this list as one of the most valuable characters in the game. Next up, we have her sort of sister character at number 6, Blue Dragon. And Blue Dragon is essentially the same as Shadow Shell, except she tweaks a little bit of the value. She's much better for GBR than Shadow Shell. She's much better for PvP than Shadow Shell, but she loses a little bit in some other venues, and she certainly needs to be tier 4 to shine. Whereas Shadow Shell doesn't need to be, so Shadow Shell has more value with less investment. Blue Dragon absolutely needs the maximum investment in order to really shine. But with maximum investment, she's a powerhouse. Insane leadership for the Warriors of the Sky. By far the strongest member of the Warriors of the Sky for PvP. Insane counterattack, ignore targeting ability. A little bit fragile if you're going to take her into PvE content. She does have a bit of sustain issues, but she also has the most insane tier 4 ability with a 1000% damage hit per hit, which is, you know, bonkers bananas, and up there with Thanos as the highest one. So yeah, very, very strong combo of abilities. Obviously needs a little bit of support in terms of Sunbird to really shine for things like PvP. But the fact that you have all of that flexibility in a single character, where you can build them for PvE or PvP quite easily, certainly makes her among the best value characters in the game. Kicking off the top 5, we have Red Goblin, aka Green Goblin, and this character honestly might be the best tier 3 and the most valuable tier 3 in the game. You get just insane value in a single package that is basically unmatched at this level. All allies for the leadership are going to get attack and ignore dodge, which is very hard to beat. And then you combo that up with the Oz formula, where all villains are going to get increased damage to heroes and villains, which is bonkers. So he basically has a better leadership than Polaris, and a better support than Polaris, and almost as good of a support as Shuri. Just bonkers, just really good stuff. And if that was it, he might still make the top 10. But then he's an insane damage dealer. He caps ABX. He can do, you know, World Boss Legend content. He can do a little bit of GBR. He doesn't have any PvP value, but I think having all of those insane passives and that insane leadership, and then to also have a very powerful meta, you know, very top of the line PvE content character himself, is just absolutely bonkers. Really, really powerful stuff. And you can, if you decide to, you can switch him up, and he has the flexibility, of course, as a character to switch up to a speed type that deals poison damage rather than fire, and then also as a blast type who has even more buffs for the Dark Avengers. So yeah, one of the most flexible characters and one of the most buffed characters in the game. Another member of the Sinister Six rounds out the top 4 here, Dr. Octopus. Very ugly, but very, very powerful. Combining the ability to just do massive amounts of damage in World Boss Legend content on his own with insanely proc-friendly abilities, with the then ability to go into other content like ABX and ABL and absolutely dominate, easily replacing Namor and Moon Knight, which is a very difficult thing to do. He might be a little bit overrated at this level, given the fact that he doesn't have much value outside of those 3 game modes, those 4 game modes, I should say, World Boss, GBR, ABX, ABL. but he dominates those game modes in a way that few other characters do, and he's super easy to play, and he's super flexible, meaning you can build him with an energy or a proc, you can build him with a rage, and he's still going to do a fantastic job with it. Thor, kicking off the top 3, no surprise here, the best farming character, or one of the best farming characters in the game, combined with being a universal type that has insanely high burst damage, means that even with the introduction of Star-Lord a year later, Thor is still the de facto alien male hero god for ABL. That's a big deal, not to mention the fact that he can compete with Scarlet Witch for ABX. He's very good for World Boss Legend, very good for GBR, and you're essentially left with a character who's an insane damage dealer whose only negative or only downside is a lack of PvP content. You also have the ability to shore up one of his other weaknesses, which is not having a leadership, by giving him an artifact, which then converts his leadership into more damage. So you have a very, very powerful character that we've talked about to end. Not going to really sing his praises too much, but I gave you sort of the short bullet point summary on what makes him so valuable still in the game. Second to first, another universal type, another tier 4 Black Bolt. No surprises here. Insane damage output, very easy to play, V-pad skill, super fun. Essentially the same as Thor, except you swap out the farming ability for just even more attack, because he buffs all Inhumans, so he has that leadership always available in case any Inhumans in the future get buffs. And then you also have the fact that he's a villain. So you have that ability to do content that Thor and other characters otherwise couldn't do. He does get locked out as an Inhuman from some content, but he dominates World Boss Legend, ABX, ABL, like few do, right? He's one of the few ABL characters that can easily cap. He dominates GBR and basically only falls short in PvP, despite also having an Inhuman's leadership. But of course, with Thor and Black Bolt having 3rd and 2nd place locked up, that means there can only be one for number 1. Now, Jean Grey is one of the most expensive characters in the game, if not the most expensive if you consider tier 4. So having her on the list of most value characters does seem a little bit questionable until you consider that Jean Grey literally does everything. Everything that I've said that every other character does, Jean Grey does. The only thing she is literally lacking, if I'm not being hyperbolic, is a support buff. She does not have any support buffs to her allies. That's the only thing she doesn't do. She does have a leadership. Yes, she does. She is amazing for all PvE content, including farming. Yes, she is. She's insane, and she's the queen, and she's the meta definer for PvP. That is also true. There could only be one. You really cannot argue to get more value out of a single character than Jean Grey, despite her cost. You can build her PvP, you can build her PvE, you can build her hybrid, one of the few characters that can still be built hybrid, and she absolutely dominates the game in every facet. It is no exaggeration to say that if you've been playing this game for a few months, you should consider saving up for Jean Grey. She's truly that good, and frankly, she probably inspired me to make this video in the first place. So yeah, top 10 most valuable characters in the game. Do you disagree or not? Hit me up down below in the comments. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button. It helps out the channel tremendously, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.